Most people think rich people buy things with cash. In reality, some of the wealthiest people in the world avoid spending their own money whenever possible. That sounds ridiculous. But when Evans met a millionaire who seemed to live on loans, he discovered why. The man across from him refused to pay for his dinner with his own money. That made no sense. Victor Hale was worth hundreds of millions. Businesses in 3 countries, luxury properties, private investments. The kind of man people imagined had more cash than he could ever spend. Yet, as the waiter placed the bill on the table, Victor signed it calmly and said something Evans couldn't stop thinking about. "I rarely spend my own cash." Evans laughed. Victor didn't. That single sentence bothered him for weeks, because everything Evans had learned about money said the opposite. Avoid debt. Stay away from loans. Borrowing was dangerous. At least that's what he'd always believed. The strange part was that Victor seemed to live by completely different rules. A few days later, Evans heard Victor had purchased another property. Loan. Then Victor invested in a growing company. Loan. Then he financed a major business expansion. Another loan. Everything seemed to involve borrowing. But what happened next confused Evans even more. Victor kept getting richer. That wasn't supposed to happen. Everyone Evans knew treated debt like quicksand. The deeper you stepped into it, the harder it became to escape. Yet Victor seemed to be using debt without fear. The question haunted Evans. What did Victor know that everyone else didn't? A month later, Victor invited him to his estate. Not a mansion, an estate, long winding roads, silent gates, gardens that seemed to stretch forever. As they walked through the property, Evans finally asked, "If you're rich, why borrow money at all? Why not just pay cash?" Victor smiled. "Because selling assets is expensive." Evans frowned. Victor pointed toward the city skyline in the distance. Most wealthy people aren't rich because they hold cash. They're rich because they own assets. Businesses, stocks, real estate, investments. Then Victor stopped walking. Let's say I own $50 million in investments. If I sell them to buy something in cash, I lose ownership of assets that keep growing. I may trigger taxes, and I lose opportunities those assets could create in the future. For the first time, Evans felt his assumptions crack. Victor continued, "So, instead of selling my assets, I borrow against them." "The bank lends you money because of what you already own?" Evans asked. "Exactly." Then Victor gave an example. "My investments grow at roughly 10% a year. My loan costs 4%. Evans paused. Then the realization hit him. Victor wasn't borrowing because he lacked money. He was borrowing because keeping his assets could be more valuable than selling them. The loan wasn't replacing wealth. It was helping preserve it. For weeks afterward, Evans couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. He started noticing something. People often use debt in 2 completely different ways. Some borrowed to impress people, cars they couldn't afford, lifestyles they couldn't sustain, things that lost value. Others borrowed to acquire assets that produced income, ownership, or growth. Same tool, different outcome. That realization created a small shift in how Evans thought about money. Instead of asking, "Is debt good or bad?" he began asking, "What is the debt being used for?" Some debt consumes, some debt produces. The rich don't borrow because they're out of money. They borrow because they don't want to interrupt money that is already working.